Hi everyone, so I'll just wait for maybe one more minute for anyone else who wants to join, and then we can get started. Just to check, can everyone see? Oh, hang on, let me check if the chat is enabled. Should be now. Can someone say in the chat if you can see the slides? Just say yes or no. And if you can hear me as well. Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you. So we'll wait until 2:01 and then we can get started. And if anyone wants to join afterwards, I'll just be taking you through the introduction slides, so they won't really miss much. Okay, I'll get started now, seeing as it's 2:01 now. So today it's just talking about what kind of things you need to do to get ready for the UCAT. So I'll be going through all the different sections of the UCAT, and I'll also talk you through some tips and tricks that might be useful for each of the sections. I'll be going through some logistical stuff as well, so like dates for when you need to register for the UCAT and things like that. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, either about the UCAT or any questions about medical school and university life, I'm happy to answer that as well. So just to introduce myself, my name's Shruti. I'm one of the fourth year medical students in Bristol, and I intercalated last year at Imperial. And I did endocrinology. So I've done my intercalation and then I'm just back in Bristol to finish my last 2 years. Okay. A bit about SixMed. So people who've come to previous sessions before might have already seen these slides. So one thing the main thing is that it was created by medical students for other medical students. And we've taught a lot of people in the past 6 years. The kind of events we run are these surgery webinars like the one you're attending today, which is usually on every other Sunday, 2 to 3 p.m. And we also do some UCAT and BMAT support. So if you see the on the screen on the right, so you can see that we do some, UCAT and BMAT support, so masterclasses. You get access to a website which contains lots of questions that you can practice on and time yourself doing mock exams. And then there's also UCAT workbook, which talks you through how to tackle each type of question to maximize your marks, because with UCAT, it's all about technique and the time rather than sitting down and revising a topic, because it's more of an aptitude test than a knowledge-based test. And similarly, we also offer the personal statement support. So again, there's a masterclass on how to actually write the personal statement. But then once you start writing it, there's also things like how to edit your redrafts. So one thing that we offer is you sending in your personal statement and then current medical students like looking at it and trying to help you edit or give you some comments on how to improve. And then there's interview support as well. So that comes on a bit later in the year. So October, November, December and January, we run a lot of interview courses on weekends where you can come and attend these interview skills course, basically, where in the morning you learn how to sort of answer questions. And then in the afternoon, we run a mock interview for you guys so you can have a go at doing an MMI or a panel interview. So Deborah, is this all free? No, so these ones, the personal statement support and all of that stuff, you do have to pay for it. So it's on the website. You can have a look at prices and things like that. These surgery sessions are free, so the ones that you're attending today, and they will cover most of the things that are required for your application. But in terms of resources and additional support, those kind of things you have to pay for. So yeah, I've already introduced myself. So as I said, I'm a Bristol medical student. So if anyone has any questions specifically about Bristol, feel free to ask them. I also applied to Cardiff, St George's in London and King's College London. So questions on any of those universities, I'm happy to answer as well. And same with Imperial because I intercalated there. I think these slides are a bit outdated, so I'm not currently intercalating. I intercalated last year. Okay, so the agenda for today, the things we're covering. So the first thing to do is just talk about the introduction to the UCAT and just going through some admin-y stuff, which is a bit boring, but obviously important for you guys to know so you can write down those dates in your diary and make sure that you don't miss any of the deadlines in terms of registering. Then we'll go on to all the different types of UCAT sections. I have to give a warning that, I'm not going to go through all the different types of questions and all the different types of techniques you can use for UCAT, because obviously this is only a 1 hour session. But I will try my best to give you tips and tricks for each of those sections. And then, yeah, as I said, top tips, and then we'll go through a Q&A. Just some housekeeping. I think all of you are already muted, so that's not a problem. And I'll try and make the session as interactive as possible, because obviously it's quite boring if you're just sitting there not really interacting and just listening. So I don't want to be lecturing you. I just want to sort of make this an interactive session so that you guys have a go at these types of questions as well. So during those interactive bits, if you just want to type your answers in the chat box, and also feel free to ask any questions as we go along, and I'll try my best to answer everything. So before we start, this is 1, to just check the chat is working, and also 2, to just see where you guys are at. So on a scale of 1 to 4, how confident are you revising for the UCAT at the moment? So 1 being not confident at all and 4 being fully confident. Where on this scale are you? You can just type in the number. Okay, most people around a 1 or a 2. Okay, fine. So what course type are the medical schools you applied to? I'm going to park that question. I will answer it at the end if that's okay. But I will get to that question afterwards. Okay, so most people 1 or 2s, fine. So hopefully by the end of the session, you can get to either a 3 or a 4, or just feel maybe a bit more confident as to what is involved in the UCAT. So main things we're covering today, just understand what the UCAT is and what they're trying to test you, and learn how to approach the different types of questions you can get. So first of all, just talking about what the UCAT itself is. So University Clinical Aptitude Test. So as I said, it's an aptitude test, not a knowledge-based test. It's the admissions test that a lot of universities use for medicine and dentistry. But you may already know that some universities don't use UCAT, they use the BMAT instead. So that's Oxbridge, Leeds, UCL, Imperial, and a few others, which I can't think off the top of my head. So it's a computer-based multiple choice question exam, and this might, come as a shock to some people because you might have just been used to writing written paper exams. And it was definitely very different for me because I haven't done like an online exam when I was in year 12 doing the UCAT. So it took some time getting used to actually answering questions on a computer, and staring at the screen for that long a time, it can get quite tiring. So when you're doing your UCAT practice, yes, there are some books that you can use to practice questions, but actually trying to make sure that most of your practice is on the computer, and usually on one of those PCs rather than a laptop, because that's what you'll get in the actual exam, is really useful, because then on the day you're not thrown off by the fact that it's a different computer, or the fact that you're using a computer rather than a paper and things like that. This test you have to book yourself, and you book it through the Pearson VUE test centres. So if some of you have already done your driving theory tests, it's basically the same place you do that in. That's where you do the UCAT exams as well. Just bear in mind that whilst you're doing your UCAT exam, there'll be other people around you in that room doing their driving test exam, or doing their SJT if they're a final year medical student. So there's lots of different people in there. It's not just people doing UCAT. So just don't be thrown off by that. Some people will be a bit noisier than others. So just make sure you, when you're practicing your questions, actually do it in a slightly noisy environment, like a library where you can hear some whispering or some people moving around, because that will again get you used to the environment that you're going to do your actual test in. As I said, so again, if you're applying for the, that's supposed to say 2024 entry or a deferred entry for 2025, you still need to sit the UCAT this summer, basically. So the dates are just slightly wrong there. It's supposed to say 2023. So essentially what I'm saying is, regardless of whether you're applying for this upcoming academic year or for the year following that, and if you wanted to defer your entry, you still have to sit the UCAT this year because you're actually sending your application off this year. Okay, some important things. It does cost money to sit the exam, so it's a £70 fee. I'm not sure if this has changed, so please have a look at the UCAT website just to make sure you know how much it costs to sit the exam. For each academic cycle, you only are able to have one attempt at this exam. So if you're applying for entry in 2024, then this summer is the only one sitting. That's the only chance you can get, and whatever score you get, that's what you have to apply with. You don't get to resit it before your 2024 entry. One good thing about the UCAT, you get your results straight away. So unlike BMAT, where the results are published a few weeks later and then they're sent to the universities, with UCAT, because you know your results straight away, in a way that's an advantage, because you might be thinking, okay, I want to apply to this university. This is my dream university. On the day, if you're lucky and you get the UCAT score for that university, that's really good. But if you don't get the score, or if you think, oh, it might be a bit risky that if I apply to this university, then you can sort of rethink your decision as to whether you want to apply there or not. So it just gives you more of a leeway as to which universities you can and can't apply to. So you're maximizing your chances of getting into medicine. The universities also use the scores differently to allocate interviews and offers. So again, trying to be tactical when you get your score. So if you get a really high score and you initially, before writing the UCAT, thought, oh, I'm never going to be able to go to this university because they have such a high cutoff for their UCAT, but then now you've got the score, of course, I can try and apply for that one because you might be a strong candidate for that university, compared to at another university where maybe you didn't score enough. Then you can think, okay, well, they don't look at the UCAT score as much, so maybe I have more of a chance applying to them. So be tactical and be flexible. Yes, you might have like a very big dream university that you've wanted to go to always, but just bearing in mind that all universities for medicine are just as good as each other, because they have to standardize the quality of doctors that are being produced from these universities. So just because you think one is better than the other, that's not necessarily the case when you actually go to the universities. So try and keep an open mind with the UCAT score, and don't put too much pressure on yourself with these scores as well, because as I said, different universities use the scores to different levels. So which universities actually require the UCAT? It's a long list, so most universities do require it. And that's why I always recommend it's actually good to do the UCAT, even if you're only applying to 1 or 2 UCAT universities, because then what you can essentially do is sort of maximize your chances of getting in, especially if you don't do as well in the BMAT and things like that. Okay, so what are the actual sections? Before I go on to the slide, and just see a few more questions come up. So are you allowed to request earplugs in the UCAT? Yes, you are. I think someone's answered that already. You can. Are there cutoff scores for the UCAT or each university? It's so there's national cutoffs each year as to like what the average candidate scored. But there's also, each university has a specific cutoff, which they will publish on their university website for the medicine entry area. They will say it every year and they will tell you the cutoff. If they don't, then you can find out the previous year's cutoff and you can go off of that, because they don't really change much, to be honest. from the previous year. So just have a look at that. But yeah, each university will have their specific cutoffs. Some of them will look at the UCAT more than your personal statement, but then other universities prefer to look at your personal statement compared to your UCAT. So the weighting is not as much as on your UCAT as it is on your personal statement or your A-level grades, your predicted grades, sorry. So it varies from university to university, which is why I'm telling you guys, when you've decided which universities you want to apply to, make sure you research it properly to see what they're actually allocating marks for. So the sections, first one's verbal reasoning. So essentially you get given a massive passage and you have to evaluate the written information and then answer the questions based on that. So if you've done the 11 plus or the 12 plus and you've come across verbal reasoning, it's essentially a bit more complicated version of what you did then. So 44 questions and you have 21 minutes to do it in. So you have approximately 28 seconds, which seems like not a lot of time, but with practice, you will be able to sort of answer these questions under that timescale. And bear in mind that obviously some questions will be a lot easier than others. So you may only be spending 10 or 15 seconds in one question. So you can actually use those additional seconds in another question, which you're struggling more on. Decision making. So this is essentially you get sort of puzzles and different problems and probability questions and things like that, which you have to use logic in order to answer them. So it's difficult explaining decision making because there's so many different types of questions you can get, but I will take you through an example later on. So for that one, you have the most amount of time. So you have 29 questions to complete in 31 minutes. So just over 60 seconds per question. Quantitative reasoning is one that most students find easy because it's essentially just maths. So evaluating numerical information, and you get 36 questions to do in 25 minutes. So approximately 41 seconds per question. A massive tip for quantitative reasoning, try and practice your mental maths, like try and make sure, yes, you can sort of practice the, use the calculator that's there, but actually like making sure to sort of do simple addition, subtraction in your head can just really help you in terms of time. But then at the same time, I can completely understand that if you're trying to do a lot of mental maths in your head in a very stressful situation, you may feel like you're, you know, getting the wrong answer in your head, which I definitely felt. I always had to check with the calculator afterwards. So don't feel pressured to just use your mental maths, but at the same time, try and practice doing like simple addition and subtraction and multiplication in your head so that you're just shaving down your time a little bit at least. Abstract reasoning, so this is essentially the non-verbal reasoning section of your UCAT. So again, if people have done 11 or 12 plus, you might know what non-verbal reasoning is, where you get given loads of different shapes and you have to find like the common pattern and then predict what the next shape will look like or something like that. So essentially that's what it is. This one people find the hardest because there's 50 questions to complete and you only get 12 minutes. So you have approximately 24 or 23 seconds per question. So you're very, very tight for time in this one. But again, spotting those patterns and recognizing those common things that can come up only happens with practice. And then situational judgment. So this is probably, I found it the easiest section. They give you different sort of ethical scenarios or medical scenarios, and they ask you to rank whether the response to that scenario is very appropriate or very inappropriate, or and things like that. So the way to make your life easier with that section is just reading the GMC guidance to a good doctor, because it literally tells you how to behave as a medical professional and as a medical student, which essentially is what they're testing you on in the SJT. So, so in that one, you get 69 questions to do it in 26 minutes. Seems like a lot of questions. Actually, you always have a lot of time left in the situational judgment section, just because it is more of an instinctive answer and it's a lot of common sense. So those questions are relatively easy to do. So it takes about 23 seconds per question. Okay, so I've got some more questions. Let's have a look. I'm sure Leeds now use the UCAT for 2024 entry. Okay, fair enough. I did not know that, but thanks for updating everyone. That was quite useful. I'm going to leave for 10 minutes, so can I get a recording if possible, as it's an emergency? I think all the sessions are recorded anyway, so you should have access to them afterwards, so it should be fine. Okay, where was I? Right. So how does scoring work? So essentially this subsections are split into the cognitive and the non-cognitive sections. So the cognitive subtests are your verbal reasoning, decision making, quantitative reasoning, and abstract reasoning. And those 4 sections are scored between 300 and 900, so 900 being the maximum you can get. And then the marks from each of those 4 sections are then combined for an overall score between 1200 and 3600. So 3600 is the max you can get. The non-cognitive subtests is your SJT, so your final section. And instead of expressing it as a number scoring system, it's expressed as a band. So band 1 is the highest band you can get, so that's good. Band 2 is also relatively good. Band 3 is okay, but it means that you may not get as many interviews, only because the situational judgment is a test of your personality and your sort of nature of being a doctor. So it's the only way for them to know whether you understand like the professional nature of medicine. So that's why band 3, that you can still be invited for interviews, but you may be considered less compared to someone who got a band 1 or a band 2. And then band 4, it's the lowest band you can get. And I haven't heard of many people getting an interview with a band 4 SJT score. So that's why that section is actually really important, because the SJT, they actually look at it separately to your other tests as well. So you might get a really, really good score in your cognitive subtest. Say you got like 3,450 or something. That's obviously a really good score, or 3,500. And but then in the non-cognitive subtest, you get a band 4. Again, they will sort of look at that differently because you've got a band 4 compared to the other scores. So just bear that in mind. And again, that varies from university to university. And off the top of my head, I don't know which universities look at it more. So have a look on the website. So average scores for last year. So there were about 36,000 people, I think, who wrote the UCAT, from what I remember from the website. In verbal reasoning, people scored 567. So as you can see, it is quite a difficult section, verbal reasoning. It's one that a lot of people find hard. Decision making was 616. Quantitative reasoning, people did the best in. So, oh no, actually abstract reasoning, people did the best in. So quantitative reasoning, 658 was the average score. And abstract reasoning, 659 was the average score. And then in situational judgment, I've just put the result for band 2. But about 36% of individuals got a band 2 and 20% got a band 1. And I think the rest of them got band 3 or band 4. But again, you can have a look at all the information online. Okay, just talking through the timeline, just for your own benefit. So the deadline for that, so the opening for that has already gone. So 16th of May was when you are able to start registering for your account for your UCAT. So if you haven't done that, make sure to do that. And if one thing I forgot to mention before, I know I said the exam costs £70 to sit, but if you are sort of financially struggling, then there are bursaries and access arrangement applications open. So the bursary is just, you can apply for it so that the exam gets paid for. And then the access arrangement is, say if you need extra time for your UCAT, instead of applying for the standard UCAT exam, you guys will apply for something called UCAT SEN, which is just sort of for anyone who has special needs or anyone who needs extra time. They will get extra time per section. So you just apply for a slightly different application. The questions are the same, you just get more time. So both of them have opened already. So if you haven't registered for your account, make sure you do that. And then on the 20th of June, which is coming up, you can start booking for your exams. And the exam date, usually people book between end of August to October. I would say try and get it done out of the way before you start year 13, only because if you're thinking about, imagine if you're doing your if you're studying for a UCAT exam in September, October, but at the same time you're preparing for your mocks, for your A levels, so that they can give you predicted grades before you apply. It might just be a lot to study at the same time. And then on top of that, if you're considering doing the BMAT as well, again, it might be a lot of things to juggle at once. So trying and getting the UCAT out of the way in the summer or the start of September might actually benefit you in the long run. You can start writing the test from as early as 10th of July all the way up until October the 16th. So yeah, obviously try not to book it too early, because again, that might not benefit you. I did mine at the end of August, on the last day of August, I think. And that suited me well, just because I got it out of the way, and then the week after I started school. So it just worked out best for me. So if that's something you want to do, feel free to do that. But then if you really feel like you need the max amount of time, obviously take it in September or October. It's personal preference. Yeah, so the deadline for the access arrangement that I was talking about, the UCAT SAN stuff and the additional time, that is on the 19th of September, 12 p.m. And the maximum time that you can book your test for before it closes is the 21st of September. And the final test day is the 28th of September this year. And the deadline for the bursary, so in case you want your test reimbursed when you've sat it, that's on the 29th of September. And on the 16th of October is when your UCAS deadline is. I've just put that in so that you remember that that's the date that you submit your personal statement and everything else. And then in early November, the results from your UCAT get sent out to the universities as well, which is when you start hearing about interviews and things like that. So all the boring stuff out the way now. So we'll talk about the actual sections. So the first section you get is verbal reasoning. And as I said before, you get 44 questions to do in 21 minutes. And essentially you get 11 different passages and you have to answer questions based on them. So you get 4 questions per passage. The questions can be, what's the most suitable answer? Or it can be, they'll give you a passage and then they'll say, they'll give you a statement and they'll say, from the passage, is the statement true, false, or can you not tell from the passage? So it's all about sort of learning those skills to be able to scan the passage well, and make sure that you don't waste too much time actually reading the entire passage. So looking at an example of a true or false question. So I'll give you guys maybe exactly how much you would get in the actual exam. So let me just get timer up. So I think it's about 28 seconds, isn't it? So I'm going to give you guys 28 seconds for this section. And then I want you to see if you can come up with an answer. If you can't come up with an answer, it's not the end of the world. I will go through how to do this section. So 28 seconds starting from now. As soon as you found the answer, try and put it in the chat. Okay, that was the end of the timer. So essentially that's how it will feel. It'll be 28 seconds per question. That's what you want to aim for. So has anyone come up with an answer? If you haven't, don't worry. Okay, so few people saying can't tell, few people saying false. Okay, fine. For the people who've come up with an answer, can someone tell me like what kind of technique you used to come up with the answer, whichever it is? Read the question first. Yes, well done. That is the first step. So don't read the passage first, read the question. Because the passage, imagine in 28 seconds, you will not be able to read the entire passage and then answer all the questions. It's just physically impossible. And also it's just a waste of time. So read the question first, perfect. And that's the same technique that once you've come into medical school and you're doing your multiple choice questions for your finals exam, read the question first, because it will give you so much information so that you can go back and pick out the best bits that you need. So question 1, university students need to undertake a summer internship or work experience in order to be offered a full-time job. So that's what the statement is saying. And then it's saying, which of the following statements are true, false, or cannot tell? So essentially, I read the statement and then looked at the text to see, yeah, perfect. What I do next after reading the statement is actually finding some keywords. So a keyword that I would pick up is university students. And then I would sort of highlight in my head need as well, and then undertakes summer internship, and the other one would be work experience, full-time job. So that's sort of the main keywords that I would pick out. The reason why in my head I also highlighted need is because that then determines whether an answer can be true or false or can't tell, because usually when they put absolute answers, but then in the text they're quite vague, then you immediately know that the answer is can't tell rather than false or true, or whatever it is. So just trying to hunt for one of these keywords in the text is what I would do next. So read the question first, then find the keywords, then try to hunt for the keywords in the text. So if I just pick university students or students, I can see work experience internships are considered extremely important for university students looking for graduate jobs. That's what it says there. It's not really telling me whether they need to do an internship or a work experience to be offered a full-time job. So let me see if I can find anything else. So if I try and look for summer internship at somewhere. So it says here, internships can be beneficial to talk about at future job interviews. So it says it can be, but then at the same time, it also gives you the option of it's not necessary. If there was a word like it's crucial to be able to talk about at future jobs interviews, that would make my decision more of sort of a true rather than a cannot tell. The companies that are, and then let me see if I can find any other things. Yeah, so other than that, I can't really see anything. So from those two sentences, what I can see is, whilst, summer internships and work experience are useful to be able to talk about at future job interviews, as the text says, it's not necessary, because in this statement, it's saying you need to undertake a summer internship to be offered a full-time job, which obviously is not what's said in the text. So as a result, the answer is cannot tell. Does everyone who said false understand why it's cannot tell instead of false? Yes, no, yeah, perfect. Okay. I'll move on then. So essentially that's, oh, it's false actually, hang on. That might be an error on my part. I think it's supposed to say can't tell because I remember this question. So it's supposed to say can't tell. So apologies for what it says on the slide. Sorry, it should say can't tell. Okay. So the main tips for verbal reasoning. As I said before, read the question first and then search for your answer in the text and try to practice as much as you can under the timed conditions. So one thing that I find really difficult to do, it's easier said than done to say someone don't read the entire text, but your brain automatically, when it's even looking for the key words, you start to actually read the entire sentence and then you find yourself reading the entire passage. So one way to help with that is to read rather than left to right in a different direction. It sounds weird, but it does work. So if everyone can see my cursor here, so if you start at the bottom, you can actually read diagonally to find your keywords, or you can read that way down, or you can read right to left, just to sort of trick your brain and prevent yourself from reading the text, the whole text. So that's something that might help you guys. Try not to overthink your answers or hesitate. So if you think it's false, just make sure you put down false. If you're sort of unsure, still put down an answer, but then flag it and come back to it at the end when you have time. Because when you're putting down an answer, you're still giving yourself, 33% chance of getting it right. So never leave an answer blank, never leave a question blank. Try and learn to scan effectively as well, like I taught you guys now. And as I said, if you're really struggling, flag the question, move on, and then come back to it later when you have a bit more time to sort of reevaluate the question. Okay, moving on to decision making. So this one is the one where you have the most time on. So 29 questions to do it in 31 minutes. And essentially you can get graphs where you have to, they'll give you sort of line graphs or bar charts to interpret and compare two different things to. Or they may give you free text questions to assess your problem solving skills. There's lots of different question types in decision making. So you can get puzzles, you can get Venn diagrams, you can get probability questions and things like that. And it's more about learning how to tackle each of those questions. And actually this section can be quite fun because it's quite different to the other ones where you're just staring and sort of reading out a passage. This one, because you tend to sort of have to figure out using logic, it's a bit, I don't know, a bit more easier to get through compared to the other sections. You may get some drag and drop questions as well, so I'll go through that in a second. Or they may give you a question, like an argumentative question, and they'll ask you to pick the best conclusion for that argumentative question. And again, the most words that matches with the question in the text is the right answer normally. So an example of a drag and drop question, because this is the one that people are most sort of curious about, as in what is it? So essentially you'll get something like 3 statements here, and then the question will say answer yes if the conclusion follows or no if it doesn't. So the question says all of my jumpers are blue, some of your jumpers are red, but none are yellow. The jumper is either yours or mine. Answer yes if the conclusion follows and no if it doesn't. And then it gives you a series of different statements and you have to say yes or no to see whether each of them agree with the conclusion from this information given here. So how would you guys go about approaching this question? Or if you've already figured out an answer, just say A is and whatever answer, and then try and explain to me how you got there. A is false or no. Yeah, okay. None are yellow, fine. A is no. So A is no, everyone's sort of in agreement with that. So yeah, as someone pointed out, none of the jumpers are yellow. So obviously the first statement, the jumper is yellow, does not make sense at all. So yes, you guys are absolutely right. So the first one is no. The second one, B, the jumper is red. Now, going back to the statement, we've got all of my jumpers are blue, some of your jumpers are red, but none of them are yellow. So we know that some of the other person's jumpers are red, and we don't know whether the jumper is the other person's or mine. So the jumper is red. Do we think it's no or yes? No as well, yeah, because it's almost like a can't tell statement, isn't it? We can't tell whether it's red or blue exactly. And because the jumper could be either the other person's or mine, it's really difficult to tell whether the jumper is absolutely red. So because this is a sort of absolute statement, but it's contradicting what's being said there, again, that's a no. Correct. So I think you guys are getting the hang of this. Someone's jumped to E, they've said no for that one. We'll come back to that one in a second. C, if this jumper is mine, it's blue. So we know that that's true because the first sentence it's saying all of my jumpers are blue. And in this question, it's saying if the jumper is mine, it has to be blue, which makes sense. So that's yes. Okay, what do we think about the next one? D, if the jumper is yours, it's red. D is no. Okay, a few people have already said that. Yeah, exactly. Because only some of the jumpers are red. We don't know what the other color jumpers are. So we can't definitively say that if the jumper is the other person's, it's absolutely red. So it's no. And then E, if the jumper is not mine, it's red. What do we think? No, perfect. Yeah, I think someone said E no before, didn't they? Who was it? Deborah said that quite early on, which is good. Yeah, so essentially this is called a syllogism. It's a type of question where you'll basically get like sort of drag and drop boxes of yes or no, and then you have to just decide which answers are yes and which answers are no. The reason why I put this question up on the box is it's a bit controversial, these types of questions, because say if you got 4 out of 5 of these statements correct, then you would get, I think, 1 mark. And if you got all of the statements correct, you would get 2 marks. But if you got only 3 statements or less correct, then you won't get any marks for this question. So just being really careful in terms of how you actually read the question. It's really important for these questions, like really important. So one technique to use, which I might actually just draw for you guys. So it's literally creating a code. So just basically shortening these sentences can help you so that you can keep referring back. So you can literally say, excuse my handwriting, I just can't do this on this laptop. All my jumpers, I'm just going to say J is equal to blue. Yeah. And so that will be your first code. And then second one, sum of your jumpers. So I'm just going to put sum of your jumpers equals red, but not all. And then we know that none of them are yellow. So none, I'm just going to put none yellow. You guys get the idea. So if you just sort of do that, and then you can sort of create a code by saying some of the other person's jumpers are red but not all. So then when you get questions like this, you've technically already created a code for it so that you know which ones to straight away answer and then which ones you might need a bit more time to think about. It's a very badly done code there, but it's just to help you shorten that long question so you don't have to keep going back and reading it again and again. Okay, tips for decision making. You will get a whiteboard. I forgot to mention this earlier. You get a small whiteboard and you can write down key information so that you, like the code I created, you can write that on your whiteboard so that you can keep referring back to it. And if you want to do any working out, you can use the whiteboard as well. With decision making, unlike verbal reasoning, do not skim over the information. All the information they give you is important and you need it to figure out what's going on. So don't skim over the information, read it carefully. Again, practice makes perfect. And then if you're really struggling, flag, move on and come back to it later. Next one, so quantitative reasoning, you've got 36 questions to do in 25 minutes. Essentially, it's just maths problems. And it's, you know, for people who are really anxious about it, if you're not doing A-level maths, it's completely understandable that you might think, oh, I haven't done maths in quite a long time, so I'm not really sure whether I'll be good at this section, or if you feel that maths in general is your weak section. It's essentially just to reassure you guys, it's GCSE level maths, because they know that some people don't do maths at A level. So they're testing your GCSE knowledge and your ability to work under strict time conditions. So that's why I said, like, getting to grips with your mental maths can really help with this section. Make sure to use the calculator. You do get a calculator. It's not like one of the scientific calculators that you normally use in maths and science. It tends to be like a really, really simple calculator. So make sure that you get used to using that calculator and not one of your scientific calculators, because obviously it won't have some of the functions like changing the fractions to percentages and things like that. You're going to have to manually do that. So just be wary of that and make sure you practice with that calculator rather than your own. Avoid thinking about the questions you flagged before. So this is really important, I think, for quantitative reasoning, because even though you've flagged and moved on from that question, your brain might still keep trying to figure out that question. Try avoiding doing that, because then you'll lose your concentration on the current question you're on and maybe not read it properly and then put down the wrong answer. So try avoiding doing that. Moving on to abstract reasoning. So with this one, you have 50 questions to cover in 12 minutes. Essentially, it's asking you to identify patterns within lots of different sets of shapes and predict the next sequence. So I've just screenshotted one here. I couldn't find many before this session, so I haven't got like a proper question for you guys to practice. But this is essentially what it will look like. So you'll get set A and set B, and then they'll essentially ask you out of these test shapes, which one of these out of 1, 2, and 3 fits into either set A or set B, and you have to pick the correct one. So there's different types of questions, again, in abstract reasoning. So this is one of them where you get given set A and set B, and then they'll give you a shape and they'll say to you, which set does that shape belong to? So it could either belong to set A, or it could belong to set B, or it could belong to neither of the sets. So for example, with this one, you have to find a common pattern in set A, which might be that there's certain number of sides, or certain number of colored shapes, or certain number of shapes in the corners, or an even number of angles or an odd number of angles. So there'll be lots of different patterns. And then what you're trying to find is a similar pattern. So say, for example, in set A, they had about 10 different sides in each of the boxes, in each of the tiles. But in set B, they had 12 sides in each of the boxes. And then they're asking you, does shape 1 fit into set A or set B? Then you're going to have to count the sides, see if it's 10 or see if there's 12 sides. So if it has 10 sides, it will fit into set A. If it has 12 sides, it would fit into set B. If it has 14 or 15 sides, obviously it's not going to fit into neither of them. So you would put the answer as neither. The other type of question you can get is you might get given a sequence of shapes, and then you're asked to predict what's going to happen to that tile next. So again, you're trying to figure out the changing pattern in each tile, and then you're trying to predict what's going to happen if we changed it one more time, and then you're picking the right answer based on that. And then the last thing is situational judgment. So you get 69 questions in 26 minutes. It essentially assesses lots of different situations and asks you what you would do in ethically and morally difficult scenarios. So there's 2 different types of questions you can get, where the first one can be, they can ask you to choose the most important answer. And then the other one could be to ask you to rank answers from most to least appropriate. So those are the only 2 types you can get. So appropriateness questions and importance questions. So just covering one of those questions. So this is an appropriateness question. So this scenario says you're a 3rd-year medical student shadowing a doctor on the wards. They ask you to go and take a history from a patient by yourself and report back whilst they go and see another patient. Midway through your history taking, the patient starts to ask questions as they don't fully understand why you're there and talking to them. They ask several personal questions about where you live, your family, etc. You're unsure about how much information you're allowed to disclose without crossing the professionalism boundary. Rate the following based on how appropriate they are to the situation. Question 1, speak to the patient openly about your life. So do you guys think this is a very appropriate thing to do, appropriate but not ideal, inappropriate but not awful, or a very inappropriate thing to do? What do you think? So just type your answers in. You can just say, for very appropriate, you can just say VA. And then for appropriate, you can just say appropriate, or AI. Or for inappropriate but not awful, you can say IA. And then for very inappropriate, you can just say very IN. Or something like that. You don't have to type it out. Yeah, okay. So we've got a mix between most people saying very inappropriate thing to do, some people saying inappropriate but not really not awful. So in this situation, I would actually say this is a very inappropriate thing to do, because you're not there on a personal level. So speaking about where you live, your family, and all of those things, it is crossing the professionalism boundary, because just as we have to protect their confidentiality, we also shouldn't be talking too much in depth about our personal lives in the workplace. And as a result, it is a very inappropriate thing to do. So just be aware that would be one of the more extreme answers, so it'd be inappropriate. So for people who put inappropriate but not awful, I can see why you did that, and you won't necessarily be completely wrong. You would get sort of half a point, because you still recognize that the action to speak to the patient openly about your life is an inappropriate thing. You just didn't put down how inappropriate it is, or you weren't able to comprehend that very well. So you'll still get half a point, but essentially the best way to look at this is most answers tend to be on the extremes. They're either very appropriate or very inappropriate. When it comes to appropriate but not ideal, or inappropriate but not awful, that's when you're sort of umming and ahhing. So essentially, if you've got I don't know what's happened there. Every time you look at a scenario and you've looked at the question, first of all, just draw a line in the middle here. And if I just show actually, if you just draw a line there, all I want you guys to do, the first thing I want you guys to do after you've read the question, first of all, decide is the statement appropriate or inappropriate? After you've done that, then put yourself in the shoes of the patient, or if you were in a GP practice and a GP was doing this to you, where they were sharing a lot of information, do you think that's professional or not professional? It's probably a very inappropriate thing to do because you're there for a professional problem. You shouldn't really be discussing personal things. The way to differentiate between whether it's inappropriate but not awful or a very inappropriate thing to do is by reading that thing that I told you guys about, so the GMC guidance to a good doctor. And I think I've shared a link at the end of the session, so I can copy and paste that into the group chat if you guys find that helpful. All right, which one is the correct answer? Sorry, I didn't hear. So the answer was very inappropriate thing to do, sorry. Okay, so top tips in general. Try and practice under timed conditions. When you first start, I would actually say, without looking at any books, without looking at any practice questions, just do one of the mock papers. It seems weird, but do one of the mock papers, because that's going to be your baseline score. Because number one, it will tell you, without any revision, which section you find easier than others. And the other thing, it will also help you decide, have a baseline which you can compare it to as you continue studying and studying, so you can see yourself getting better. So I always think it's important to do a mock fresh without having looked at any UCAT stuff to begin with, because it is also a bit of a confidence booster when you see that you're progressing as well. And then flag, move on and return later if you're finding the question difficult. And obviously try not to overthink about a question. If you're unsure of it, just go with your gut and flag it. And then if you have time, come back to it and try and figure it out. So one of the common FAQs we get is, when should I take the UCAT? So if you're only taking the UCAT, I would recommend any time between August and October, preferably, as I said before at the start, August or September, so you have more time to make your university choices based on your score, so you're not sort of rushing your UCAS application. And the second thing is it will also just give you a bit more time to start focusing on your A-levels. If you're also planning on doing the BMAT, I would recommend taking the UCAT maybe a bit earlier, or end of August, which then allows you more time to prepare for the BMAT, because as you guys know, the BMAT is knowledge-based and it's based on biology, maths, physics, chemistry, and also your English as well, which is your final section, which is an essay section. So you do need a bit more time to prepare for that, because especially if you're not doing A-level physics or one of the sciences or the maths, you're going to have to spend time studying it. So just be wary that BMAT does take a little bit more time when you're revising. Okay, so as I said, the official UCAT website and the 6med UCAT resources are really useful. And there's another website here which just shows you the things to know about the UCAT. I don't seem to have linked the GMC guidance to a good doctor. So if you guys will just bear with me 1 second, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to try and find the link so I can put it in the chat. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to put that in the chat. It seems like a really long document, but I've just posted it in the chat, but it's actually very easy to read. It's not bad at all. So, yeah. Okay, I'm going to skip that slide. And I'm going to go straight to questions because we don't have much time. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I know someone put a question in the chat earlier, so let me just see if I can answer that. I joined slightly late. Is there a recording of this we can view? Everyone who's attended should have access to recordings afterwards. So yeah, you can view it through a recording. What course type of the medical schools you applied to? Bristol and Cardiff are a spiral curriculum, which basically means that you'll learn a topic and then you'll revisit it in second year, revisit it again in third year, and then again in fourth year, and then again in fifth year to consolidate your learning. I think it's a really good way to learn because there's so much to cover in medicine, and unless you keep going over it, you will forget it. So for me, it worked out the best. I know King's is, what do? They do PBL. So problem-based learning with a bit of lectures and a bit of laboratory stuff and then a bit of placement, which is also what Bristol does, but we just do it in a spiral learning curriculum. So we have case-based learning, laboratory sessions in first and second year, and then in third, fourth and fifth year, you're in hospital full time. So you learn it in hospital and you're mainly seeing patients. And then you learn all your practical skills like taking bloods and catheterization, putting cannulas in, and stitching up wounds and things like that. So you learn all the practical skills of a junior doctor as well as the theory. And then St. George's, I think, is also problem-based learning. So all the universities I applied for, technically similar, they're very like PBL or CBL approaches with a lot of clinical time, because I didn't want to go to a university which has clinical placements really late, because I wanted to make sure that I developed my clinical skills alongside my theory. So that's why I applied to universities which focused more on that, like seeing the patients much early on in your course. How can you improve your ability to spot patterns in abstract reasoning? There's only a certain amount of patterns you can get. So there might be shape, the pattern might be a shape, it might be size, it might be symmetry, and it might be shading, or it might be position. So the rotational sort of symmetry, or it could be the number, and number meaning number of sides, number of angles, number of shapes, and all of that. A number could be anything basically, or number of right angles, number of lines of symmetry. Those are the kind of patterns you can get. And the way I remember it is SSSPN. That's the acronym I use. So SSSPN, I'll just post it in the chat, which stands for shape, size, shading / symmetry, and then position and number. So those are the only types of patterns you can get, basically. So that's what you're looking for. So just in a systematic fashion, you could literally go through that acronym to check what the pattern is. How many hours of UCAT prep did you do per day? I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I did my UCAT in 2017, so it's a really, really long time ago now. I think I started my prep in end of June, beginning of July. So approximately 6 to 7 weeks of prep basically before my exam, because my exam was on the end of August. And I would probably do like a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the evening, only because those are the only times I worked best. And obviously it was summer holidays, so you don't want to be sitting inside all the time, and also you can get easily burnt out if you're doing too much prep. So I'd say a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the afternoon, probably about 4 to 5 hours a day, maybe, with regular breaks. And the type of revision I did varied. So usually on a Monday, I would do a mock paper in the morning and then sort of focus on which sections I need to spend more time on. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday would be the days where you're sort of just working on the sections you're weakest at. And then Friday, I'd do another mock just to check if I've improved on those scores that I was weaker in. And then Saturday and Sunday, I would sort of take it a bit easy and do a bit of revision, like a few questions, but I wouldn't sort of exhaust myself doing like 6 or 7 hours a day. So that's essentially how I spread my weeks out. And also it's good to do regular mocks, because then you can see where you're at, because initially you might think you're really, really good at quantitative reasoning, but then a few weeks later, because you haven't spent as much time studying it, your score in quantitative reasoning might actually drop. So making sure that you're giving an equal amount of time to all the sections and not becoming overconfident in one area and then not spending enough time is useful as well. And that's why I think those mocks help. Can I have the recording? Yeah, it should be sent out to you, I think. I don't have access to the actual recordings because it's the company's Zoom account. So if you don't get it, you'll have to email them. Should I prep for UCAT and BMAT simultaneously? You can do. You just need to be really good with organizing your time. So do you recommend only using UCAT Ninja and Sigma tutorials for the UCAT? What about other resources such as Medify? I would say use what works for you best. There are a lot of the universities, a lot of the websites have sort of sample questions. Do those sample questions, see what the website is like, and then see which one works best for you, because everyone's different. Right now in my year group, we're all studying for our finals, and some people are using certain resources, some people are using other ones. It's more based on your preference, really. So what works for you won't work for somebody else necessarily. So use those sample questions and look at what the test format is like on that website and then practice through that, because it does vary from person to person, and I don't want to force a certain resource on anyone because I think people work differently. So try and trial out all of them. Will the recording be sent via email? I'm not sure. I'm sorry. Can't answer that question. How can I improve reading speed and scanning skills? So the techniques I've mentioned in this session, trying and like reading diagonally across and just learning to pick out correct keywords. It just comes with more and more practice, really. We've got more questions in the chat. Okay. Where can we find free UCAT questions? I'm not too sure. I think there are websites. I think you'll just have to have a Google and find out. The one I used UCAT Ninja, and then I used what is it called? Kaplan Test Prep. I think I used that website. They were quite good. I use UCAT Ninja because that's the one my sister used as well, and she liked that one. So that's the one she went for, and I used that for a bit. And then I used more than one resource closer to the exam so that I can like test myself on different questions which may not be offered on the one website that I have. How do you know what university's teaching style is? It says on their website, so you'll have to go and look on there. Yeah, they should say on there. How do you improve your mental arithmetic? There's some online like question banks that you can do to just practice mental maths, or you can just speak to your maths teachers at school and ask them if they have like certain types of problems that they can give you to practice, and then if they have some time they can go over the feedback with you. No problem at all. Good luck for all your UCAT exams. I know it can be a very stressful time because, you know, it determines a lot for you guys in terms of your UCAT application and whether or not you get interviews. So it can be stressful, but just if you get a good score, that's great. If you don't get the score that you were looking for, it's not the end of the world. There are universities which don't look at the UCAT as much. So please don't be disheartened if you're finding it difficult. Everyone finds the UCAT difficult, and you know it's one of those tests which, unfortunately, because so many people are applying to medicine, it's a way for them to sort of standardize the cohort and make it easier for them to know who to invite for interview and who not to interview. And it is difficult, but with a lot of work and, you know, practicing under timed conditions, I think you guys will do well. No problem. Do placements at medical school happen completely separately to lectures? Like, do you have a week of lectures? And no, they're all integrated. So you will have placement But then in between that, you will also have seminars, small group discussions, practical lab sessions, clinical skills sessions. You'll have bedside teaching, which is where a doctor comes with you to see a patient, but the doctor is assessing you. So you'll be speaking to the patient, examining them, and then you'll get feedback afterwards of how well you did. And that's to help you practice for your practical exams and just your general bedside manner. So it's really useful. You don't really get many lectures after second year. In first and second year, they're just teaching you the foundations. And then in third, fourth, and fifth year, you learn more into like the depth of the diseases. And the best way you learn that is from actually seeing the patient. So most of the time you're in hospital, but then like in the afternoon or in the morning on a Monday or a Friday, you might have a CBL or a PBL session where you'll be learning with a doctor there or a clinical teaching fellow who runs these sessions, or they appoint a student every week to lead the session, and then the other students to be sort of the rest of the team. And then you work through cases together as if you would when you are a doctor. So it teaches you like teamwork and all of that stuff as well. So that's essentially how it works. Sorry, did you mention that you intercalated in Imperial? If so, what degree was that? I intercalated in medical sciences with endocrinology at Imperial. Really good course if endocrinology is something you're interested in, which is everything to do with hormones. That's something that I really liked in third year, which is why I chose to intercalate. And I didn't want to stay in Bristol, so that's why I decided to go out for a year. How do you find medicine in Bristol? It's really good. The reason why I like it a lot is because in first year, the first week of starting medical school, you start seeing patients either in hospital or in GP. And that's just something that I really liked because you don't get that in a lot of other universities. The other thing as well is the placements are really well set out, and the teachers are really, really good. Like they make sure you understand the topics and they know to teach you what you need to know for clinical practice. Which is obviously the most important thing, because you're going to be doing a clinical job, not a research job. Because with a disease, you can learn all the ins and outs at the molecular level of a disease. But when you're actually seeing the patient in front of you, you need to know management, and you need to understand the disease just enough so that you are able to actually know what to do in a clinical situation. So that's why Bristol is really good, because it's very patient-centered and sort of understanding communication skills, focusing on the patient rather than like just the diseases, which is why it's really good. If you live really far away from uni, do you still need to do the MMI? Yes, you'll have to travel there. I had to travel there, and we stayed overnight the night before the interview and then did the interview. Yeah, you'll have to travel. What was the question? Sorry, Asma. It was to do with, I have to do the UCAT if the unis. Hang on, Asma, if you can just rephrase the question, because I'm not sure what you want me to answer. Just rephrase it and I'll try and answer it. Hang on. Tyra, how hard was it? The MMI. It's not too bad. I think the interview is probably the best bit, because you actually get to meet them and show them who you are and show your personality. I say once you get an interview, you are probably halfway there. All they want to do, because they like your grades, they like your personal statement, all they want to see is if your personality and the way you learn fits in with their teaching style and their university. That's all they want to see in the MMI. So being confident, being yourself and being honest, it takes you a long way in an interview. And MMIs are hard in the sense that there's lots of different things they can test you on, but there are certain things you can prepare for, like why medicine is going to be asked at every single interview. Why do you want to study at this medical school? It's going to be asked at every single medical school. So there's certain questions you can prep for. There's just one or two questions that, with an ethics question, they can ask you different scenarios, which you might not necessarily have prepped for all of them, but you would have still covered most of them. So I really enjoyed the interview, to be honest, but that was the easiest bit compared to the rest of the application process. Did you consider Oxbridge? I think I would have done, but I didn't like the fact that it's a compulsory 6-year course. So that's why, like, from all of the options I told you guys, you can see that they're 5-year courses with the option to intercalate, because at the point of applying, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to intercalate or not. Whereas in Oxford, it's a compulsory 6-year course. Same with UCL, same with Imperial. It's a compulsory 6-year course. And then a lot of people who do go to those universities, especially the people I've met while I was at Imperial, some of them don't necessarily want to intercalate, but obviously because the course is 6 years, you have to. So that I didn't like the fact that that was sort of a restriction. And the second thing was I didn't really want to have the pressure of having to apply to Oxford, Cambridge, and Bristol was my top choice. So that's essentially where I went for. Do I have to do the UCAT if the unis I want to go to require BMAT? No. If you're only applying to BMAT universities, then you don't have to do the UCAT. But if you're applying to both, then yes, you have to do the UCAT as well, obviously, for obvious reasons. Do they ask you traditional questions like why medicine? Yes, I think they're sort of going away from that a bit now, though, because it's such a standard question. So they may ask you why medicine, but they may implement it in a different way. So rather than just saying, why do you want to study medicine? They may say it as, from your work experience, what inspired you to study medicine, which forces you more to talk and focus heavily on your work experience and what you've done. So yeah. So they might phrase it slightly differently. Okay, so I don't think there are any more questions. So if everyone, oh, actually, what work experience, volunteering, extracurricular activities did you do? Well, work experience wise, I did 1 week at a GP practice, 1 week in hospital in obstetrics and gynae, and then I think that's about it in terms of hospital stuff. And then I did 1 week of residential volunteering where you stay in a place where it's like a care home and you look after people who are there. And then I did some long-term volunteering, like working in a charity shop. And that was just, I did that as part of my Duke of Edinburgh, but it also was sort of volunteering and learning people skills and stuff. And that's pretty much it in terms of work experience and volunteering. How would you answer the question on why not healthcare? What do you mean, why not healthcare? Is childland volunteering good enough for volunteering in hospital, A&E volunteering? Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. The difference between, oh, okay, I see what you mean. Allied healthcare professionals versus medicine. I think with medicine, being a doctor, it's more of the having the ability to make those end decisions for patients, and nurses and other allied health professionals, they're good. They do spend a lot more time with patients and they develop better healthcare professional patient relationships. And actually nurses are able to do a lot more than there used to be. There's lots of advanced care nurses and things like that who do know, maybe even a lot more than doctors do. But in terms of the decision making and running the multidisciplinary team and things like that, a lot of the time it's the doctors deciding whether or not to do a certain procedure or give a certain drug, or deciding like what to do in terms of palliative care and stuff like that. So the end goal decisions and things like that is what doctor does. Obviously roles are now changing a bit more, especially with physician associates being there, and also advanced practitioner nurses. So the lines are being blurred, but I think the main thing is sort of making that decision, which is the main thing. I had 2 weeks in cardiothoracic surgery, which was good. Yeah. Any sort of work experience is useful, but it's more about how you reflect on that work experience rather than what kind of work experience you have. It doesn't really matter whether you work in a GP or whether you do surgery or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. As long as you're able to talk about it and reflect on it in your interview and your personal statement, that's more important. So it's about the quality, not the quantity. That's what I'd say. Virtual experience does count, but I'm just going to put a disclaimer and say that because, COVID has, gone out of the picture a bit and things have gone back to normal, I think getting that in-person work experience is still really good because people are now able to get it. So I think there's less of an excuse to just do virtual experience. But if you're really struggling, which is completely understandable, virtual experience is still good, but try your best to see if you can get in-person stuff. Because in-person stuff, it's your specific experience, whereas virtual experience, it's sort of scenarios which lots of people might have done that same virtual work experience. So when you're trying to differentiate you from another candidate, you want those personalized examples, which you can only get in an in-person situation. All right, so I will end it there. Thanks everyone for asking all the questions and for being interactive during the session. And have a good rest of your day.